Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who was usually very late in the mornings, save upon those not infrequent occasions when he was up all night, was seated at the breakfast table. I stood upon the hearth rug and picked up the stick which our visitor had left behind him the night before. It was a fine, thick piece of wood, bulbous headed, of the sort which is known as a penag lawyer. Just under the head was a broad silver band, nearly an inch across. To James Mortimer, M.R.C.S., from his friends of the C.C.H., was engraved upon it with the date 1884. It was just such a stick as the old-fashioned family practitioner used to carry, dignified, solid, and reassuring. Well, Watson, what do you make of it? Holmes was sitting with his back to me, and I have given him no sign of my occupation. How did you know what I was doing? I believe you have eyes in the back of your head. I have, at least, a well-polished, silver-plated coffee-pot in front of me, said he. But tell me, Watson, what do you make of our visitor's stick, since we have been so unfortunate as to miss him and have no notion of his errand? This accidental souvenir becomes of importance. Let me hear you reconstruct the man by an examination of it. I think, said I, following as far as I could the methods of my companion, that Dr. Mortimer is a successful elderly medical man, well esteemed, since those who know him give him this mark of their appreciation. Good, said Holmes. Excellent. I think also that the probability is in favor of his being a country practitioner who does a great deal of his visiting on foot. Why so? Because this stick, though originally a very handsome one, has been so knocked about that I can hardly imagine a town practitioner carrying it. The thick iron ferrule is worn down, so it is evident that he has done a great amount of walking with it. Perfectly sound, said Holmes. And then again there is the friends of the C.C.H. I should guess that to be the something Hunt, the local Hunt to whose members he has possibly given some surgical assistance, and which has made him a small presentation in return. Really, Watson, you excel yourself, said Holmes, pushing back his chair and lighting a cigarette. I am bound to say that in all the accounts which you have been so good as to give of my own small achievements, you have habitually underrated your own abilities. It may be that you are not yourself luminous, but you are a conductor of light. Some people without possessing genius have a remarkable power of stimulating it. I confess, my dear fellow, that I am very much in your debt. He had never said as much before, and I must admit that his words gave me keen pleasure, for I had often been piqued by his indifference to my admiration, and to the attempts which I had made to give publicity to his methods. I was proud, too, to think that I had so far mastered his system as to apply it in a way which earned his approval. He now took the stick from my hands and examined it for a few minutes with his naked eyes. Then, with an expression of interest, he laid down his cigarette, and carrying the cane to the window, he looked over it again with a convex lens. Interesting, though elementary, said he as he returned to his favorite corner of the settee. There are certainly one or two indications upon the stick. It gives us the basis for several deductions. Has anything escaped me? I asked with some self-importance. I trust that there is nothing of consequence which I had overlooked. I am afraid, my dear Watson, that most of your conclusions were erroneous. When I say that you stimulated me, I meant to be frank that in noting your fallacies I was occasionally guided towards the truth. Not that you are entirely wrong in this instance. The man is certainly a country practitioner, and he walks a good deal. Then I was right, to that extent. But that was all. No, no, my dear Watson, not all. By no means all. I would suggest, for example, that a presentation to a doctor is more likely to come from a hospital than from a hunt, and that when the initial CC are placed before that hospital, the words "Charing Cross" very naturally suggest themselves. You may be right. The probability lies in that direction, and if we take this as a working hypothesis, we have a fresh basis from which to start our construction of this unknown visitor. Well then, supposing that CCH does stands for Charing Cross Hospital, what further inferences may we draw? Do none suggest themselves? You know my methods. Apply them. I can only think of the obvious conclusion that the man has practiced in town before going to the country. I think that we might venture a little further than this. Look at it in this light. On what occasion would it be most probable that such a presentation would be made? When would his friends unite to give him a pledge of their goodwill? Obviously, at the moment when Dr. Mortimer withdrew from the service to the hospital in order to start in practice for himself. We know there has been a presentation. We believe there has a change from a town hospital to a country practice. Is it then stretching our inference too far to say that the presentation was on the occasion of the change? It certainly seems probable. Now you will observe that he could not have been on the staff of the hospital, since only a man well established in a London practice could hold such a position, and such one would not drift into the country. What was it that if he was in the hospital and yet not on the staff, he could only have been a house surgeon or house physician, little more than a senior student, and he left 5 years ago. The debt is on the stick, so your grave, middle-aged family practitioner vanishes into thin air, my dear Watson, and there emerges a young fellow under 30, amiable, unambitious, absent-minded, and the possession possessor of a favorite dog, which I should describe roughly as being larger than a terrier and smaller than a mastiff. I laughed incredulously as Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his settee and blew little wavering rings of smoke up to the ceiling. As to the latter part, I have no means of checking your said I, but at least it is not difficult to find out a few particulars about the man's age and the professional career. From my small medical shelf I took down the medical dictionary and turned up the name. There were several Mortimers, but only one who could be our visitor. I read his record aloud. Mortimer James, MRCS, 1882, Grimpen, Dartmoor, Devon, house surgeon from 1882 to 1884 at Charing Cross Hospital, winner of the Jackson Prize for Comparative Pathology, with essay entitled "Is Disease a Reversion?" Corresponding member of the Swedish Pathological Society, author of the Some Freaks of Atavism, do we progress, medical officer for the parishes of Grimpen, Hursley, and High Barrow. No mention of the local hunt, Watson, said Holmes with a mischievous smile, but a country doctor, as you very astutely observed. I think that I am fairly justified in my inferences. As to the adjectives, I said, if I remember right, amiable, unambitious, and absent-minded is my experience that it is only an amiable man in this world who receives testimonials, only an unambitious one who abandoned a London career for the country, and only an absent-minded one who lives his stake and not his visiting card after waiting an hour in your room. My dear fellow, how can you possibly be so sure of that? For the very simple reason that I see the dog himself on our very doorstep, and there is the ring of its owner. Don't move, I beg you, Watson. He is a professional brother of yours, and your presence may be of assistance to me. Now is the dramatic moment of fate, Watson, when you hear a step up on the stair, which is walking into your life, and you know not whether for good or ill. What is Dr. James Mortimer, the man of science, ask of Sherlock Holmes, specialist in crime? Come in. No, 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 no. Bad idea, bad idea. The recent sudden death of Sir Charles Baskerville, whose name has been mentioned as the probable Liberal candidate for Mid Devon at the next election, has cast a gloom over the country. Though Sir Charles had resided at Baskerville Hall for a comparatively short period, his amiability of character and extreme generosity had won the affection and respect of all who had been brought into contact with him. In these days of Norfolk's riches it is refreshing to find a case where the scion of old country family which has fallen upon evil days is able to make his own fortune as to bring it back with him to restore the fallen grandeur of his line. Sir Charles, as is well known, made large sums of money in South African speculation, more wise than those who go on until the will turns against them. He realized his gains and returned to England with them. It's only 2 years since he took up his residence at Baskerville Hall. It's common talk how large were those schemes of reconstruction and improvement which had been then, being himself childless, it's his openly expressed